The cold bit through my thin coat as I stood outside the Teatro del Fiore, watching couples in fur and cashmere glide past me into the warm glow of the lobby. February in Milan had no mercy for the invisible. I was there to work the private lounge upstairs, another 12-hour shift serving champagne to people who wouldn't remember my face by morning. My phone buzzed. The hospice again. I silenced it. Nana's condition was stable, they'd said yesterday, but stable meant expensive, and expensive meant I couldn't afford to lose this job by taking personal calls during service. Inside, the heat wrapped around me like forgiveness. I shook off the cold and headed for the service elevator, past the marble columns and crystal chandeliers that caught light like frozen fire. The lounge was reserved tonight for a private event, no details given, just instructions to smile, stay quiet, and keep the Prosecco flowing. By 9 o'clock, the guests had arrived. Dark suits, darker eyes, conversations conducted in whispers and knowing glances. I moved through them like smoke, refilling glasses, removing empty plates existing only when needed. That was the skill, to be there without being seen. Then he walked in. I noticed him the way you notice a shift in air pressure before a storm. Tall, precise in a charcoal suit that looked like it had been cut for him that morning. Dark hair swept back, a face that could have belonged to a Renaissance prince or a Renaissance assassin. He didn't scan the room the way the others did. He already knew where everyone was. His cologne reached me before he did, something with cedar and smoke, expensive enough that I'd never smell it anywhere but places like this. He stopped at the bar where I was opening a new bottle, and his eyes found mine. Gray-green, calm as deep water. "The Barolo," he said in Italian, his voice low and certain. "The 2015. I nodded, reaching for the bottle we kept beneath the counter for guests who knew what to ask for. My hands didn't shake. They never did, no matter how aware I was of being watched. When I poured, he didn't look at the wine. He looked at me. "You're new," he said. "Third week," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, professional. "Don't engage," the manager had warned us. "These guests don't want conversation. You pour like you've done this longer." I set the bottle down carefully. "I've worked restaurants since I was 16. He lifted the glass, inhaled, sipped, approved with a slight nod. Then his phone rang, a subtle vibration against the bar. He glanced at the screen and his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That was when my phone rang too. I grabbed it from my apron pocket, saw the hospice number, and my stomach dropped. They only called during my shift if something had changed. I stepped back from the bar, heart hammering, and answered in the only language that felt real when I was scared. "Babcia, kosai stalo," the Polish tumbled out before I could stop it. The nurse's voice was calm but urgent. Nana's blood pressure had dropped. They needed consent for an emergency procedure. I pressed my palm to my forehead, trying to think through the panic. "Tack, tack, yes, do whatever you need. I'll be there as soon as I can." I hung up and turned back to the bar, remembering too late where I was. Every conversation in the lounge had stopped. The man in the charcoal suit was watching me with an expression I couldn't read: interest, maybe, or calculation. He set his glass down and said something in rapid Italian to the man beside him, who nodded and disappeared into the crowd. "Polish," the man said to me, not a question. I swallowed. "My grandmother, I'm sorry, I—" "Don't apologize." He stepped closer and I caught that scent again, cedar and smoke. "You need to leave." "I can't, my shift is over." He pulled a card from his pocket, matte black with a single phone number embossed in silver. "Call this tomorrow, noon." I stared at the card. "Why?" "Because I need someone who speaks Polish, Italian, and enough English to navigate between them. And because your grandmother needs you tonight more than I need my wine poured correctly." He paused. "Go." I went. I spent the night in a plastic chair beside Nana's bed, holding her papery hand while machines beeped their steady rhythm. She'd stabilized by midnight, drifting into sedated sleep, but I couldn't leave. The nurse brought me weak coffee and didn't ask why I was crying. At dawn, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from the teatro, 1 text from the manager, "Don't bother coming back." I'd known it was coming, but the reality still felt like a trapdoor opening beneath me. I looked at the black card on the table beside Nana's water pitcher. No name, just that number in silver. A lifeline or a trap, I couldn't tell which. At 11:30, I stepped outside the hospice and dialed. A woman answered on the first ring. "Signorina Kowalski, Mr. DeLuca is expecting your call." I hadn't told anyone my name. "There's a car outside your location," she continued, smooth as silk over steel. "It will bring you to the office. The driver has been instructed to wait as long as necessary." I looked toward the street. A black sedan idled at the curb, windows tinted, license plate obscured by the angle. "I don't understand," I said. "Mr. DeLuca will explain. The offer is time-sensitive." She hung up. I stood there holding my phone, watching my breath cloud in the cold air. Every instinct told me to walk away. Men who sent cars without asking didn't make offers, they made transactions. But Nana needed medication the public system didn't cover. I needed a job that paid more than pouring wine for ghosts. I got in the car. The driver didn't speak. We moved through Milan's morning traffic in silence, heading north toward the financial district where glass towers reflected the winter sky. The car smelled like leather and that same cedar cologne. We stopped at a building I recognized from the skyline, one of those modern fortresses where deals were made and broken behind soundproof glass. The driver opened my door. "17th floor," he said, first words he'd spoken. The elevator was mirror bright and fast enough to make my ears pop. When the doors opened, I stepped into a reception area that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. White marble, dark wood, a single orchid on a pedestal that probably cost more than my rent. The woman from the phone stood waiting. Elegant in a navy suit, dark hair and a perfect chignon, smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This way, Signorina Kowalski." She led me down a hall lined with modern art, bold slashes of color that probably meant something to people who had time to interpret them. At the end, double doors in frosted glass. She knocked once and opened them without waiting for an answer. The office beyond was all windows and winter light. The man from last night, DeLuca, stood at the glass, phone to his ear, speaking rapid Italian about shipping schedules and customs clearances. He lifted one finger. "Wait." I waited. He finished the call and turned. In daylight, he looked younger than I'd thought, maybe 35, with the kind of face that photographs would love and human beings would find hard to read. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I sat. He remained standing, arms crossed, studying me the way an art dealer might study a painting they were considering acquiring. "Your grandmother," he said finally, "how is she?" "Stable." "Good." He moved to the desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, set it in front of me. "Inez Kowalski, 24, degree in linguistics from Warsaw, unfinished. Moved to Milan 18 months ago after your grandmother's stroke. You've worked 8 different service jobs since then, none lasting more than 3 months. You're 3 weeks behind on rent. Your grandmother's care costs more than you make." I felt my face go hot. "You had me investigated." "I had you verified." He sat, leaning back in his chair with the ease of someone who'd never had to justify himself. "I don't make offers without information." "What offer?" "I need a translator. Polish to Italian, Italian to Polish, with enough English to handle international calls. The work is administrative mostly, meetings, documents, correspondence. Some travel. I pay well." "How well?" He named a figure that made my vision blur. "That's I couldn't finish." Market rate for discretion and availability. He slid a contract across the desk. 6 months, renewable if both parties agree. You'll have access to my assistant for logistics, a company phone, and an advance to cover immediate expenses. He paused, including your grandmother's hospice care. There it was, the hook beneath the bait. Why me? I asked. You could hire an agency. Agencies ask questions. They have loyalties to their own interests. I need someone with a reason to be loyal to mine. You mean leverage? I mean incentive. His eyes held mine. I'm offering you a way to take care of your grandmother and yourself. What you do with that offer is your choice. Choice, the word felt slippery. I looked at the contract. Standard NDAs, non-compete clauses, termination conditions, all normal until I reached the compensation section. He wasn't lying about market rate. This was more than market rate. What's the work really? I asked. Exactly what I said. Translation, coordination, presence at meetings where Polish is spoken. My business has expanded into Eastern European markets. I need someone who understands the nuances. Your business. Import-export, logistics, distribution networks. He said it the way someone might say accounting or consulting, words that could mean anything or nothing. I thought of the men in the lounge last night, the way conversations had stopped when phones rang, the weight of silence that suggested things left unsaid. I'm not stupid, I said quietly. I know what logistics can mean. He didn't deny it. Then you also know that every business operates in gray areas. The question isn't whether you approve. It's whether you need what I'm offering enough to accept it. He was right, that was the question. And I already knew my answer. When do I start? He smiled, a real smile this time, brief but genuine. Now. He pressed a button on his phone. The assistant appeared with a different folder, this one thicker. Your grandmother will be transferred to a private facility this afternoon, he said. Better care, private room, access to specialists. The advance will cover your rent and living expenses for the next 3 months. Anya will provide you with a phone, access codes, and your first assignment. I stared at him. You arranged all this before I agreed. I don't make offers I don't expect people to accept. He stood, extending his hand. Welcome aboard, Inez. I shook his hand. Warm, firm, the grip of someone who closed deals and expected them to stay closed. As Anya led me back toward the elevator, I glanced over my shoulder. DeLuca was already on another call, silhouetted against the windows, master of his glass tower and everything within reach of his voice. I just signed a contract with the Storm. I wondered how long it would take before I got pulled under. The private facility was in Monza, 20 minutes north of the city, hidden behind iron gates and manicured gardens. Nana was moved that afternoon while I signed paperwork in an office that smelled like lavender and money. The director, a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes and a wedding ring that could have funded a small country, assured me that my grandmother would receive round-the-clock care, physical therapy, access to cardiologists and neurologists, whatever was needed. Mr. DeLuca's referrals receive our highest standard of attention, she said, as if that explained everything. It did. When I finally saw Nana in her new room, private, sunlit, with a view of the gardens, she was awake and confused. Inez, her voice was thin as tissue paper. Where are we? I took her hand. Somewhere better, you're going to get the care you need. How can we afford? I have a new job. Her faded blue eyes searched mine. She'd always been able to read me, even after the stroke had stolen half her words. What kind of job makes miracles? Translation work, I said, which was true, for a businessman. What kind of businessman? The kind who moved people and money like chess pieces. The kind whose smile didn't quite reach his eyes until it did, and then you weren't sure if you should be relieved or terrified. The kind who pays well, I said. She squeezed my hand weakly. Be careful, Kachani. When something seems too good, check for the strings. I know about the strings, Babsha. Do you, or are you just telling yourself you do? I didn't have an answer for that. The company phone arrived at my apartment that evening, sleek, black, preloaded with contacts and encrypted messaging apps I'd never seen before. Anya's number was first on the list. I called it. Tomorrow, she said without preamble, 8 a.m. the office. Wear something professional but comfortable. You'll be traveling. Where? Mr. DeLuca will brief you in the morning. She hung up before I could ask anything else. I spent that night trying on the 3 work-appropriate outfits I owned, none of which felt right for whatever I'd walked into. Finally, I settled on black trousers and a charcoal sweater, neutral, forgettable, the uniform of someone who didn't want attention. At 7:30 the next morning, the same black sedan idled outside my building. Different driver, same silence. The office at 8 a.m. was different from the day before, busier, sharper, full of people moving with purpose. Anya met me in the lobby and handed me an espresso in a paper cup that probably cost more than my breakfast. He's waiting, she said. DeLuca's office door was open. He stood at a table spread with maps and documents, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, phone trapped between shoulder and ear while he made notes in the margin of a contract. He saw me and gestured me in without breaking stride in the conversation, something about container schedules and port inspections in Gdansk. When he hung up, he straightened and met my eyes. Ever been to Warsaw? Not since I was 12. You're going back. Tomorrow morning, 3 days. I have a meeting with potential partners, old textile manufacturers looking to expand distribution into Italy. The negotiations will be in Polish. I need you there to ensure nothing is lost in translation, literal or otherwise. That's it, just translation. An observation. Tell me who hesitates, who pushes, who lies. He handed me a tablet loaded with files. Background on the company, the principles, the market analysis. Read it on the plane. We're flying commercial. He almost smiled. No. The jet was small, sleek, and so quiet I barely felt the takeoff. Leather seats, polished wood, windows that showed the Alps falling away beneath us like crumpled silk. DeLuca sat across from me, working on his laptop with the focused intensity of someone who didn't believe in wasted time. I tried to focus on the files he'd given me, but my eyes kept drifting to the windows, to the absurd luxury of this small metal tube carrying me back toward the country I'd left behind. Nervous? He asked without looking up. Should I be? Only if you think the people we're meeting are more dangerous than they actually are. He closed the laptop. They're manufacturers, Inez, not soldiers. They want access to Italian markets, and they're willing to pay for expertise in navigating customs and distribution. It's a straightforward business transaction. Then why do you need me to watch for lies? Because all business transactions involve lies. The question is which ones matter. He leaned back, studying me. You don't trust me. I don't know you. Fair. He was quiet for a moment. My father built this company from nothing. He understood that trust is expensive and loyalty is earned. I'm offering you both, but yes, there are strings. There always are. The question is whether the strings are chains or safety lines. And which are yours? That depends on whether you try to run. The honesty of it caught me off guard. I'm not running, I said. I have nowhere to go. Good, because I checked on your grandmother this morning. The specialist from Zurich will see her next week. Best cardiologist in Europe. My throat tightened. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. She's your leverage. That makes her mine. He opened his laptop again. Get some sleep. We land in 3 hours and the meeting is at 6. I wanted to argue, to push back against the casual way he just claimed ownership of my life. but he'd already arranged for a Swiss specialist. The strings weren't chains. Not yet. Warsaw in February looked like a bruise, gray buildings against gray sky, snow turned to slush on streets I half remembered from childhood. The hotel was new, glass and steel downtown, rooms that smelled like nothing at all. DeLuca had a suite on the top floor. I had a room 3 doors down. "Rest until 5, he said when we arrived. "Anya sent appropriate clothes for the meeting. They're in your closet." I found the dress hanging like a ghost, deep navy silk, simple cut, probably cost more than I used to make in a month. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. At 5:30 I knocked on his suite door. He answered in a dark suit that made him look less like a businessman and more like what he probably was, someone whose power came from knowing exactly when to smile and when to let silence do the threatening. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." The meeting was in a private dining room at a restaurant I'd never heard of, the kind of place where menus had no prices and waiters moved like choreographed dancers. The manufacturers were already there, 3 men in their 50s, sharp suits and soft hands, eyes that tracked us from the moment we entered. DeLuca greeted them in careful Polish, respectful but not deferential. They relaxed slightly. Then the negotiation began. For 2 hours I translated, watching the words and the spaces between them. They wanted guarantees DeLuca couldn't give. He wanted concessions they couldn't afford. The dance was precise, every step calculated. But I noticed the youngest one, gray temples, nervous hands, kept glancing at his phone. When we broke for coffee, I told DeLuca. "The one on the left, he's waiting for a message." "Good," DeLuca said quietly, "so am I." 10 minutes later the man's phone buzzed. He read the message and his face went slack. DeLuca smiled. "Gentlemen, I believe we can reach an agreement tonight." We did. By midnight the contracts were signed, toasts made with vodka that burned clean and cold. In the car back to the hotel, DeLuca was silent until we pulled up to the entrance. "You did well," he said. "What was the message?" "Proof that I could make their distribution problems disappear or reappear depending on their cooperation." He met my eyes. "This is the work, Inez, not violence. Leverage, information, arranging circumstances until yes becomes the only sensible answer. And if someone says no anyway, then I find better leverage." He got out of the car, leaving me with that answer and the memory of 3 men signing contracts because refusal had become impossible. I went to my room and didn't sleep. We flew back to Milan the next afternoon. DeLuca worked the entire flight while I pretended to read, my mind still turning over what I'd seen. The precision of it, the way he'd orchestrated the outcome before we'd even arrived. The car took us straight to the office, where Anya was waiting with another folder. "Your grandmother had her consultation this morning," she said. "Dr. Bachman's initial assessment is cautiously optimistic. He's recommending a medication adjustment and continued monitoring." I took the folder with shaking hands. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, thank Mr. DeLuca," she glanced at him. "The Rossi situation requires your attention." He nodded, already walking toward his office. "Inez, tomorrow, 10 a.m. we have a lunch meeting at the villa. I'll send a car." Then he was gone, and I was left standing in the reception area with my grandmother's medical file and the growing understanding that I'd signed on to something I couldn't fully see the shape of yet. That night I visited Nana. She was sitting up in bed, looking stronger than I'd seen her in months. "They tell me a fancy Swiss doctor looked at my heart today," she said in Polish. "The best. Because of your new job." "Yes." She patted the bed beside her. I sat, and she took my hand in both of hers. "Your grandfather used to tell me stories," she said, "about the men he worked for in Krakow before we came to Italy, men who were generous when you were useful and ruthless when you weren't. He said the key to surviving them was remembering which one you were. What happened to grandfather? He became too useful, that's when we left. She squeezed my hand. Be careful, Inez. Men like your Mr. DeLuca don't give gifts. They make investments. Sooner or later they collect. I know. Do you love him? The question startled me. No, of course not. Then why are your hands shaking? I looked down. She was right. Fear, I said. Maybe, she said. Or maybe you're not as careful as you think you are. The villa was in the hills outside Milan, surrounded by vineyards that looked like frozen rivers in the winter light. The car wound up a private road, past gates that opened without us stopping, until we reached a house that belonged in a movie about old Italian money. DeLuca was waiting on the terrace, casual in dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, somehow more intimidating without the armor of a suit. Lunch isn't for an hour, he said. I thought you might want to see the place. He led me through rooms filled with art and history, Renaissance portraits, modern sculptures, furniture that whispered wealth so old it didn't need to announce itself. My father bought this property 30 years ago, he said, back when he was still pretending to be legitimate. And now I'm pretending better. He stopped in front of a painting, a woman in pearls, dark eyes, slight smile. My mother, she died when I was 12. I'm sorry. Don't be, she understood what she'd married into. She made her choice. He turned to me. We all make choices, Inez. The question is whether we own them. Is that what you think I'm doing, owning my choice? I think you're still deciding. He walked to the window. The people coming for lunch are important. Old families, old money, old suspicions about new players in their territory. You're here to remind them I have international reach and sophisticated operations. I'm here as decoration. You're here as evidence. There's a difference. He checked his watch. They'll arrive soon. When they do, listen more than you speak. These people communicate in what they don't say. The lunch was on the terrace despite the cold, heaters glowing like captured suns, the table set with crystal and silver that caught the light like promises. 4 guests arrived, 2 couples in their 60s, elegant and predatory, the kind of people who'd been wealthy so long they'd forgotten what need felt like. DeLuca introduced me as his assistant, his new Eastern European coordinator, essential to the expansion. They smiled with their mouths and assessed me with their eyes. The conversation flowed in Italian, smooth as the wine, art, politics, the state of the markets. But underneath ran a current of questions they were too polished to ask directly. Then the woman in the diamond earrings turned to me. And where did you study, my dear? Warsaw University, I said. Linguistics. How practical. Though I imagine working for Lorenzo must be quite an education in itself. Lorenzo, I'd never heard his first name before. He's an excellent teacher, I said carefully. I'm sure he is. Her smile had edges. His father was quite good at teaching difficult lessons as well. DeLuca set down his wine glass with precise control. My father believed in clarity. I prefer efficiency. Of course. The woman's husband leaned forward. We hear you've made progress in Gdansk. The infrastructure is solid. Distribution networks are being established. And the local complications. Resolved. The word hung in the air like a blade. After lunch, after the guests had left in their quiet, expensive cars, DeLuca walked me to the villa's garden. The vineyard stretched out below us, empty and waiting for spring. You handled that well, he said. She was testing me. She was testing us to see if you were a liability or an asset. He stopped at a stone bench. You didn't flinch when she mentioned my father. That matters. Should I have? Most people do. He had a reputation. DeLuca sat, looking out at the winter vines. He built this empire on fear and loyalty. I'm trying to build it on something more sustainable. What? Inevitability. If you make yourself essential to enough systems, you become impossible to remove. He glanced at me. That's where you come in. You're part of making me indispensable to markets that don't trust outsiders. So I'm strategy. Your survival, he stood. Come inside, it's getting cold. But I stayed on the bench, watching the light fade over the vineyards, thinking about old money and new power, and the woman in diamonds who'd looked at me like I was a variable in an equation she couldn't quite solve. I wasn't sure I could solve it either. Over the next 2 weeks, I learned the rhythm of DeLuca's world. Early meetings in his office, late dinners at restaurants where the staff knew him by sight, and the conversations happened in low voices between courses. I translated documents, sat in on conference calls, accompanied him to warehouses and shipping facilities where men in work clothes spoke to him with the careful respect reserved for people who could ruin you. He never raised his voice, never threatened. He just arranged things until cooperation became the path of least resistance. And every few days, Anya would hand me an update on Nana's condition. Stable, improving, responding well to the new treatment protocol. The strings were starting to feel less like chains and more like tethers. That scared me more than anything. One night after a particularly long day, DeLuca asked if I wanted to stay for dinner at the office. Not a meeting, just the two of us, takeout from the Thai place around the corner, eating from containers at his desk, while he told me about the logistics of moving textiles through 3 countries without triggering customs flags. You make it sound like a puzzle, I said. It is a puzzle, just one where the pieces try to arrest you if you put them together wrong, he smiled. That's what makes it interesting. Most people would call it criminal. Most people don't understand that law is just one system among many. There are others, older, more flexible. I work in the spaces between them. That's a very elegant way of saying you're a criminal. I'm a businessman who understands that all economies have formal and informal channels. I happen to specialize in the informal. He set down his container. Does that bother you? I thought about it. About Nana's private room and the Swiss doctor and the rent I hadn't worried about in weeks. It should, I said finally. But it doesn't. Not as much as I thought it would. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You're adapting. Or compromising. There's not always a difference. He stood, walked to the window. The city spread out below us, lights beginning to glow in the dusk. My father used to say that everyone has a price. The trick is knowing what currency they value. For some it's money, for others safety, security, love. He glanced at me. For you it's your grandmother. That's not a secret. No, but it's effective. He turned fully to face me. I'm not trying to manipulate you, Inez. I'm trying to be honest about what this is. You needed help. I needed someone I could trust. We're trading services. Is that all this is? A transaction? Something shifted in his expression. For now. The words settled between us like a question neither of us was ready to answer. My phone buzzed. A text from the facility. Your grandmother is asking for you. I should go, I said. I'll have a car take you. I can take the train. Inez, he said my name like a period at the end of a sentence. Let me make things easier. That's what I do. So I let him. In the car, watching the city blur past, I thought about currency and compromise, and the way he'd said for now like it was a promise disguised as a fact. Nana was asleep when I arrived, but I sat with her anyway, holding her hand while machines tracked her heartbeat in steady rhythms. I was adapting, or compromising, or falling. I wasn't sure which terrified me most. The call came at 2 in the morning. DeLuca's voice controlled but sharp. Are you awake? I am now. Get dressed. I'm sending a car. We have a situation. 20 minutes later, I was in the back of the sedan, speeding through empty streets toward an address in the industrial district. The driver said nothing, but I could feel the tension radiating off him like heat. The warehouse was lit from inside, shadows moving behind grimy windows. DeLuca stood outside with two men I recognized from the office, the ones who handled problems that didn't have paperwork. "What's going on?" I asked. "We have guests, unexpected ones. They speak Polish." He looked at me. "I need to know exactly what they're saying to each other when they think we can't understand." Inside, the warehouse smelled like motor oil and old concrete. Three men sat at a table under a harsh work light. Rough clothes, hard faces, the look of people who'd spent their lives on the wrong side of every border. DeLuca approached them calmly, spoke in Italian. They responded in broken Italian and rapid Polish. I translated for him. Threats, mostly. Accusations about territories and agreements that had been violated. They represented someone who felt disrespected by DeLuca's expansion into their markets. "Tell them," DeLuca said quietly, "that I don't respond well to midnight summons and amateur intimidation. Tell them their employer can request a meeting through proper channels if he has concerns about our arrangement." I translated. The largest man laughed a harsh, ugly sound. Then he said in Polish, not realizing I could understand, "The girl's pretty. Maybe we take her as a down payment on the disrespect." Before I could react, DeLuca moved. Not violently, that would have been expected. Instead, he pulled his phone from his pocket, made a call, and spoke two sentences. Then he said to me in English, "Tell them their employer's shipment in Gdansk is currently being inspected by customs officials who received an anonymous tip. Tell them this inspection can last 10 minutes or 10 weeks, depending on whether they get back in their truck and leave now." I translated. The men looked at each other. The large one's smile faded. They left. In the car afterward, I was shaking. DeLuca handed me his coat without comment. "You understood what he said," I said, "about me." "Yes. And you didn't. I don't solve problems with violence when I can solve them with leverage. Violence creates enemies. Leverage creates compliance." He looked out the window. "I'm sorry you had to be there." "But you needed me to be." "Yes. Because I'm useful. Because you're mine to protect." He said it simply, like a fact that needed no elaboration. "That means something in my world, more than you realize." The words should have felt possessive. Instead, they felt like the first time someone had stood between me and danger in years. "Thank you," I said quietly. He didn't answer, but his hand found mine in the darkness of the car, and he didn't let go until we reached my building. After that night, something changed. Small things, mostly. The way DeLuca checked with me before making decisions about Polish contacts. The way he'd ask about Nana without me prompting. The way his hand would rest briefly at the small of my back when we walked into meetings, a gesture that spoke of protection and claim in equal measure. I tried not to think about what it meant. I tried not to notice how his cologne had become familiar, comforting even. I tried not to care when Anya mentioned casually that DeLuca had turned down 3 dinner invitations from women who represented exactly the kind of connections that would have been useful for business. "He says he's too busy," Anya said, handing me the week's schedule. "He's never been too busy before." I didn't ask what she meant. I wasn't ready for the answer. Instead, I focused on work. A trip to Prague for meetings with crystal manufacturers. Long nights reviewing contracts in languages I was teaching myself to read between the lines of. Dinners where I learned that business was conducted in silences and gestures as much as words. And through it all, Nana grew stronger. The Swiss doctor's protocol was working. She'd started physical therapy. The nurses said she might be well enough for short visits home within months. "Your young man is a miracle worker," she said one afternoon during my visit. "He's not my young man." "No, then why do you blush when I mention him?" "I don't." "Inez," she squeezed my hand. I've been old for a long time, I know what falling looks like. The question is whether he's worth the fall. I'm not falling. Then you're a better liar than I taught you to be. That night I stayed late at the office, working on translations that didn't need to be finished until next week, avoiding my empty apartment and the thoughts that waited there. DeLuca found me at 9, sitting at the conference table surrounded by dictionaries and draft documents. "Go home," he said. "Almost done. Inez, go home." I looked up. He was leaning against the doorframe, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking tired in a way that made him seem more human than the polished version I usually saw. "Why do you do this?" I asked suddenly. "Do what?" "All of it, the empire building, the chess games with people's livelihoods. You don't need the money. Your father left you wealthy. You could do anything." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he came and sat across from me. "Because when I was 12 and my mother died, I watched my father use every resource he had to try to save her. Doctors, specialists, experimental treatments, none of it mattered. She died anyway. And I realized that power is only useful if you have enough of it." He met my eyes. "I'm building enough, so that when something matters, I never have to watch helplessly again." "Is that what I am? You making sure you have enough power?" "No," he said it firmly. "You're the first thing in a long time that's made me question whether power is actually what matters." The words hung between us, heavy with implications neither of us was ready to speak aloud. "I should go," I said quietly. "Let me drive you." "You don't have to." "I know, let me anyway." So I did. In his car, not the company sedan but his own, something low and fast that purred like a predator. We drove through Milan's empty streets while rain started to fall, soft and insistent. He parked outside my building but didn't turn off the engine. "Inez," he said. I looked at him. "This thing we're doing, the working relationship, it's becoming something else." "I know. Does that scare you?" "Yes." "Good, it should." He reached over, brushed a strand of hair from my face. The gesture was so gentle it made my breath catch. "But I need you to understand something. In my world, caring about someone makes them vulnerable. It makes me vulnerable, and vulnerable people make mistakes. Then maybe we should stop before it goes further." "We should." He said it looking at me with an expression that said he had no intention of stopping. But I don't think either of us is going to. He was right. When he kissed me, it was careful and deliberate, like he was sealing a contract he'd been negotiating for weeks. And when I kissed him back, it felt like signing my name to something I couldn't take back. We didn't speak when he walked me to my door. We didn't need to. The terms had been agreed. The next morning, Anya handed me a small box without comment. Inside was a bracelet, delicate gold links, a single pearl at the clasp. No note, none needed. I wore it to the meeting that afternoon. Distributors from Munich, technical discussion about tariffs and transport schedules. But I saw DeLuca's eyes track to my wrist, saw the slight curve of his mouth that might have been satisfaction or pleasure or claim. Probably all three. After the meeting, he asked me to stay. "We need to talk about what happens next," he said when we were alone. "Professionally." "Everything." He walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "I'm moving forward with the Prague partnership. That means more travel, more time away from Milan. I want you with me. As your translator. As someone I trust." He turned. "But I need you to understand what you're agreeing to. This life, it has costs. People watch, they judge, they make assumptions. About us. About you. They'll see the clothes, the access, the way I treat you differently than other employees. They'll draw conclusions. And those conclusions will make me a target. Possibly." I touched the bracelet at my wrist. "Is this your way of warning me off?" "No, it's my way of making sure you know what you're walking into. Because once you're in deeper, it becomes harder to walk away safely. And if I want to walk away anyway? He crossed to me, close enough that I could see the gray-green of his eyes, could smell that cedar smoke cologne. Then I let you go, with everything I promised, your grandmother's care, financial security, references that will open any door you want. No threats, no leverage, no punishment. He paused. But I hope you don't. Why? Because you're the first person in years who sees me as something other than my father's son. And because when I'm with you, the empire matters a little less than it used to. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. I kissed him instead of answering. When we broke apart, he was smiling, genuine, unguarded. Is that a yes? He asked. It's a we'll see, I said, but I'm not walking away yet. Good enough. He pressed his forehead to mine briefly, though for the record, I'm an excellent long-term investment. Arrogant. Honest. He stepped back, already shifting into business mode. The Prague trip is next week, 5 days. I'll have Anya make the arrangements. And my grandmother. I've already arranged for 24-hour nursing during our absence. She'll be safe. Of course he had. That night I visited Nana and told her I was going to Prague for work. With your Lorenzo, she said, it wasn't a question. How did you know his name? I asked the nurses, they talk. She studied me. You're wearing a bracelet you didn't have last week. I looked down at the gold and pearl. It's just jewelry. Jewelry is never just jewelry when men like that give it, she sighed. You're in love with him. I don't know. Yes, you do. You're just afraid to admit it because it makes the strings real. She was right, she usually was. What do I do? I asked. That depends. Can you live with what he is? Not who you hope he'll become, who he actually is. I thought about it. About warehouses at 2 a.m. and leverage disguised as generosity, and the careful way he orchestrated outcomes until refusal became impossible. I don't know, I said honestly, but I want to find out. Then be careful, Kochany, because men like him don't love in halves. It's everything or nothing. And once you say yes to everything, there's no going back to before. Prague in March was a watercolor, pastel buildings and Gothic spires, the vault of a river reflecting clouds and bridges like a mirror for history. We stayed at a hotel that overlooked the castle, rooms that whispered old money and older secrets. The meetings were straightforward. De Luca's reputation had preceded him, and the Czech distributors treated him with the careful respect of people who'd heard stories. I translated, watched, learned that his influence reached further than I'd imagined. On the third night, after a dinner that had lasted until midnight, we walked back to the hotel through narrow cobblestone streets. The city was quiet, lamps glowing warm in the spring darkness. My father proposed to my mother in this city, De Luca said suddenly. He brought her here to see if she could adapt to his world, to see if she'd run. Did she? No, she knew what he was and she chose him anyway. He stopped, looked up at the castle illuminated on the hill. I used to think that was brave. Now I think maybe it was just inevitable. What changed? I met someone who makes me understand why she stayed. He looked at me. Why inevitable doesn't always mean wrong. I knew what he was asking without him saying it. I'm still here, I said. For now. Maybe for longer than that. He kissed me there, in a medieval street under lamplight, and it felt like a conversation we'd been having in silence for weeks finally being spoken aloud. When we got back to the hotel, he asked if I wanted to come to his room. I did. We stayed up until dawn, talking more than anything else, his arm around me while I traced patterns on his chest, and he told me stories about his father, his mother, the empire that was half inheritance and half reinvention. I don't want to be what he was, he said quietly, but I don't know how to build something legitimate when the foundation is blood and leverage. So build something new on top of it. Use the power to create things worth protecting. Like what? I don't know, but I think you're smart enough to figure it out. He pulled me closer. Stay, not just tonight, stay in this with me, whatever it becomes. I'm terrified. So am I, he kissed my forehead. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe with anyone else. I fell asleep in his arms, breathing in cedar and smoke, and for the first time in years, I felt like I'd found something worth the risk. We flew back to Milan 2 days later, and everything was different. Anya noticed immediately. The way DeLuca's hand lingered at my back, the way he smiled when I entered a room, the way I'd stopped pretending the bracelet was just jewelry. About time, she said, handing me the week's schedule. He's been insufferable for weeks. But the happiness was fragile, and I knew it. Because in DeLuca's world, happiness made you vulnerable. And vulnerability invited attack. It came 3 weeks later, at a charity gala in Milan's old opera house. Black tie, champagne, society pretending that old money and new power could coexist peacefully. DeLuca wore a tuxedo like armor. I wore a dress that Anya had selected, midnight blue, elegant, expensive enough to signal that I belonged. The pearl bracelet at my wrist and now a matching necklace, his gift the morning after Prague. We moved through the crowd together, his hand at the small of my back, conversations flowing in 3 languages. I'd become fluent in the language of these events. The careful words, the reading between lines, the way a smile could mean alliance or threat depending on the context. Then I heard Italian behind me, a woman's voice, loud enough to carry. Of course, the Eastern European help always catches the eye. How original. I turned. The woman in the diamond earrings from the villa lunch, flanked by 2 other society women with similar expressions, disdain wrapped in good breeding. DeLuca's hand tightened on my back. "Signora Benedetti," he said, his voice cold as January. "How kind of you to take an interest in my staff." "Staff," the woman laughed. "Is that what we're calling it now? How progressive." "Careful," DeLuca said quietly. The word carried warning like a blade. "Or what? You'll arrange complications for my husband's business. We're not intimidated by new money with old tactics, Lorenzo." I felt him tense, felt the moment when he was about to say something that would burn bridges neither of us could afford to lose. I stepped forward instead. "Signora," I said in flawless Italian, "forgive me, but I believe you're confused. I'm not staff. I'm a consultant. There's a difference, though I understand the distinction might not be clear to someone whose only qualification is a surname and a wedding ring." Her face went red. "How dare?" "I dare because Mr. DeLuca allows me to, because I'm useful to him in ways that don't require family trees or social connections, because I earned this position." I smiled. "Perhaps that's a concept you're unfamiliar with." For a moment, the entire conversation around us stopped. Then DeLuca turned to me, and there was something in his eyes, pride, maybe, or recognition. "Apologize to my wife," he said clearly. The words hung in the air like revelation. Signora Benedetti's mouth opened, closed. "You're what?" "You heard me." He moved beside me, his arm around my waist now, public and claiming. "Apologize to my wife." We weren't married, we hadn't even discussed it. But the lie was perfect. The woman stammered something that might have been an apology and retreated, her companions following like confused birds. DeLuca led me onto the terrace, away from the crowd. "Wife," I said when we were alone. "Too much. We've been together less than 2 months." And yet it felt true when I said it. He turned to face me. "Tell me it didn't." I couldn't. "This is insane," I said. "Yes. Your world will eat me alive." "Not while I'm here." He took my hands. "Inez, I know this is fast. I know it's complicated. But I also know I want you beside me, not behind me. Not as staff or consultant or any other word that minimizes what you are." "And what am I?" The first thing I want to protect more than I want to expand the empire. The first person who makes me want to build something worth leaving behind instead of just something that can't be taken away. He paused. I know it's too soon. I know I should wait, but my world doesn't work on normal timelines. Things happen fast or they don't happen at all, so I'm asking stay. For real, make this real. I looked at him, this man who'd pulled me from invisibility and given me power and taught me to navigate his dangerous world. This man who'd somehow become the center of mine. Ask me properly, I said. He smiled, then knelt right there on the terrace, his expensive tuxedo against the cold stone. Inez Kowalski, will you marry me and make an honest criminal out of me? I pulled him up, laughing. Yes, but only because you said wife like you meant it. I do. When he kissed me this time, it tasted like promise and risk and the beginning of something neither of us could control. We went back inside to face the stares and whispers together. And for the first time since that cold night outside the Tetro, I didn't feel invisible. I felt chosen. The engagement changed everything and nothing. DeLuca gave me a ring, a diamond that caught light like captured stars, with a pearl at each side. His mother's pearls, he said, reset into something new. So you can carry her forward, he explained. The way you'll carry me forward, past what my father built into what I choose to make. I wore it alongside the bracelet and necklace, a collection of promises in gold and stone. But the happiness came with consequences. Benedetti, it turned out, was connected to one of DeLuca's business rivals, an old money family with political connections and grudges that went back generations. The insult at the gala had been strategic, an attempt to provoke DeLuca into making enemies he couldn't afford. Instead, he'd claimed me publicly. Now we were both targets. They'll come after you to get to me, he said one night in his apartment, after I'd moved in quietly, leaving my old life behind like a shed skin. They'll dig into your past, question your work, try to make you seem like a weakness they can exploit. Then we make sure I'm not. You're not weak, but you are, he stopped. I'm what? You're what I would burn the entire empire to protect. That makes you both a strength and a vulnerability. I went at him, took his face in my hands. Then we protect each other. You taught me how your world works. Use me the way you use everything else, strategically. I don't want to use you. Then partner with me instead. Make me part of the strategy, not just something you guard. He kissed me like I'd just solved an equation he'd been struggling with. The next day he called a meeting with his core team, Anya, the two men who handled problems, his lawyer, his accountant, and me. We're restructuring, he announced. Moving toward legitimate fronts, cleaner operations. Inez will coordinate the Eastern European expansion, but from a position of authority. Official title, official stake in the company. Anyone who wants to attack her will have to go through legal channels, and will own those channels. Anya smiled. About time you made her official. Over the next 2 months, we executed the plan. I became a partner in the distribution company, with paperwork and corporate shares and a business card that said I belonged. We hired lawyers to audit every operation, finding ways to move money through legitimate streams. We shed partnerships that couldn't survive scrutiny and built new ones with companies that could. It wasn't clean. It would never be entirely clean. But it was cleaner than it had been. And through it all, Nana grew stronger. Strong enough for weekend visits to DeLuca's villa, where she'd sit in the garden and tell him stories about my grandfather while he listened with the intensity he brought to every negotiation. Your grandfather was a smuggler, she told him one afternoon. Not drugs or weapons, just goods that people needed when the borders were closed. He believed in practical morality. The law isn't always right, and right isn't always legal. And what did you believe? DeLuca asked. I believed in him. That was enough. She looked at me. Sometimes love is choosing to believe in someone despite knowing exactly what they are. After she'd gone back to the facility, DeLuca asked, "Is that what you do? Choose to believe in me?" "Every day," I said, "sometimes twice on Sundays." He laughed, then pulled me close. "I'm trying, to be someone worth believing in." "I know. Is it working?" "Ask me in 20 years. Deal." The wedding was quiet. Just Nana, Anya, a judge, and 2 witnesses pulled from the office. I wore a simple cream dress and carried pearls instead of flowers. DeLuca wore a dark suit and looked at me like I was the only certainty in his uncertain world. We exchanged vows in Italian and Polish, promises translated into 2 languages but meaning the same thing: I choose you. In this life, with these complications, knowing the costs, I choose you. Afterward, we had dinner at the villa, real family dinner, just the 4 of us, while Nana told embarrassing stories from my childhood and Anya pretended not to be crying into her wine. That night, alone in the room that had become ours, DeLuca gave me one more gift, a leather portfolio filled with documents. "What is this?" I asked. "The company, half of it, legally yours regardless of what happens to me." He paused. "I've made enemies. Some of them are patient. I need to know that if something happens, you'll be protected. You'll have power in your own name, not just because of mine." "Nothing's going to happen." "Inez," he said my name like a prayer. "Let me protect you the only way I know how, with legal documents and financial security and power you can use without me." So I signed the papers, adding my name beside his on an empire built from shadows and smoke. And then I set them aside and pulled him close, choosing to believe, just for tonight, that we'd have time to figure out what came next. 2 years later, Nana passed away peacefully in her sleep. She'd lived long enough to see me married, to spend weekends in the villa garden, to hold my hand, and tell me she was proud of the life I'd built. "You chose well," she said the week before she died. "He's dangerous, yes, but he's dangerous for you, not to you. That's the difference." We buried her in a cemetery outside Milan, under trees that would bloom in spring. DeLuca stood beside me throughout, his hand in mine, solid and certain. At the reception afterward, small, intimate, the people who'd become family, Anya pulled me aside. "He's been different since you," she said. "Calmer, more strategic, less reckless." "That's probably just age." "No, it's you. You gave him something to build toward instead of just defend." She smiled. "Thank you for that." That night in our bedroom at the villa, DeLuca asked, "Are you okay?" "I will be. She lived well. That's more than most people get." "She lived well because of you." "Because of us." He pulled me against him, and we lay there in the darkness, listening to the house settle around us. "What do we do now?" I asked. "We keep building. The business, the life, whatever comes next." "Children. If you want them. Do you?" He was quiet for a moment. "I want to leave something behind that's worth more than what my father left me. If that's children, yes. If it's a business that helps people instead of exploiting them, yes. If it's just you and me and this villa and a life we chose, yes." "That's a lot of yes." "I'm an optimist now. You did that." I laughed. "You're a crime lord." "A reformed crime lord. There's a difference." He kissed my temple. "Go to sleep. Tomorrow we start the next chapter." 5 years after that night in the Teatro del Fiore, I stood in the same building, but this time in a box seat, not the service lounge. Beside me, DeLuca watched the opera with the attention he brought to everything, while our 3-year-old daughter slept against his shoulder. The business had transformed. Still import-export, still logistics, but cleaner now. Legal. Boring even by the standards of the world we used to navigate. DeLuca had found other ways to use power: political donations, infrastructure investments, foundations that moved money toward Eastern European hospitals and schools. The empire his father had built on fear, he was slowly remaking into something that might actually deserve the loyalty it commanded. "Bored yet?" I whispered. "Never," he shifted our daughter gently, "though I miss the danger sometimes." "Liar, you love this." "I love you, this is the side effect." Below us, the opera reached its climax, tragedy and beauty, and the eternal question of whether love redeems or destroys. I leaned against his shoulder, breathing in cedar and smoke that had become home. We'd started with a cold night and an impossible offer. We'd built something that looked like a life. And if there were still shadows at the edges, still questions about how clean was clean enough, still moments when the past threatened to pull us backward, well, we'd face them the way we'd faced everything else. Together, choosing each other. Every day. Even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The opera ended. The lights came up. Our daughter stirred and opened sleepy eyes. "Home?" she asked in the mix of Italian and Polish that was her first language. "Yes," DeLuca said, gathering her up. "Home." And we walked out into the Milan night. No longer cold, no longer invisible, no longer alone. Just us. A family built from risk and trust, and the stubborn belief that people could choose to become better than they were. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined that first night outside the theater. It was better, because it was real, and it was ours.